He said she'd never move on. Then she pulled up in a car only billionaires own. The calculated insult. The invitation arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon, sliding through the mail slot of Victoria Chen's Brooklyn brownstone, with all the subtlety of a hand grenade. She recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. Marcus's mother's pretentious cursive, all loops and flourishes designed to intimidate. Victoria set down her paintbrush, wiping cerulean blue from her fingertips as she approached the cream-colored envelope like one might approach an unexploded bomb. Inside, the cardstock was so thick it could have doubled as armor. Gold embossing caught the light from her studio windows as she read, "Mr. and Mrs. Winston Sterling request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their son, Marcus James Sterling. To Miss Penelope Grace Ashford," and there it was at the bottom, in elegant script that might as well have been written in poison. Saturday, the 15th of March, March 15th, their anniversary, or what would have been their 8th anniversary, if Marcus hadn't demolished their marriage 2 years ago with the precision of a controlled demolition. Victoria's hands trembled slightly, not from sadness but from a rage so pure it felt almost holy. She walked to her kitchen, poured herself a glass of the good wine, the Chateau Margaux she'd been saving, and read the invitation again. The reception would be held at the Sterling family's Hampton estate, a monument to old money and older prejudices where she'd never quite been welcome. Marcus's family had tolerated her, the half-Chinese artist with big dreams and empty pockets, but they'd never accepted her. When Marcus left, his mother had actually seemed relieved. "You're a dreamer, Victoria, not a doer," Marcus had said during their last fight, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that only came from a man who'd inherited his success. "I need someone who can match my ambition, not someone playing with paint while waiting for inspiration to strike." Playing with paint. 2 years later, Victoria owned Chen Contemporary, one of Manhattan's most innovative galleries. Her artists were being collected by museums. The New York Times had called her a visionary curator reshaping the landscape of contemporary art. She'd done more in 2 years without him than she'd managed in 6 years with him, no longer shrinking herself to fit into the narrow space his ego allowed. Her phone buzzed. Oliver Thorne's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a photo from their trip to Tokyo last month, both of them laughing in front of a cherry blossom tree, his arm around her shoulders, her head thrown back in genuine joy. "Still on for dinner at 8? His text read, "I have news about the Singapore acquisition." Oliver, brilliant, kind, ambitious Oliver, who'd built his venture capital firm from nothing, who understood the hunger that drove her, who celebrated her victories as enthusiastically as his own. He was everything Marcus pretended to be, self-made, genuinely successful, and secure enough in himself to love a woman who blazed just as brightly. "Come over instead," she typed back. "I have something to show you." While she waited, Victoria Googled Penelope Ashford. The search results painted a predictable picture. Southampton charity galas, a degree from Vassar she'd never used, a father who owned 3 pharmaceutical companies. She was blonde, of course, with the kind of delicate beauty that suggested she'd never had to develop a personality. In every photo, she gazed adoringly at Marcus while he looked at the camera, already planning his next move. Oliver arrived 40 minutes later, still in his suit from a board meeting but carrying takeout from their favorite Thai place. He was tall and lean, with the kind of understated presence that commanded rooms without raising his voice. His dark eyes found hers immediately, reading her mood before she said a word. "What happened?" he asked, setting down the food. She handed him the invitation, watched his expression shift from curiosity to understanding to something harder, protective. Oliver had heard the whole story, had held her through the nights when the old wound still ached, had never once suggested she was overreacting or should move on faster. "March 15th, he said quietly. "That's deliberately cruel." "It's Marcus," Victoria replied. "Cruelty dressed up as coincidence is his signature move." Oliver set down the invitation, moved closer to her. "What do you want to do?" "Part of me wants to ignore it completely. Show him he's so irrelevant I didn't even notice the date." "And the other part?" Victoria met his eyes. "The other part wants to walk in there and show everyone, his family, his friends, his new fiancée, exactly who they discarded." A slow smile spread across Oliver's face, the one he got when he was about to propose something audacious. "Then let's do exactly that." Oliver, I can't just crash his wedding. You're not crashing. You were invited. He picked up the invitation again. It says, and guest. I'll be your guest. His family will have a collective aneurysm if I show up. Good. Oliver's smile widened. In fact, let's make sure of it. The new Bugatti Chiron gets delivered next week. We could take that. Victoria stared at him. She knew about the car. Oliver had ordered it months ago, a celebration of his firm's latest unicorn investment. $3.5 million of automotive perfection, one of only 30 in the world. You want to drive a Bugatti to my ex-husband's wedding? I want to arrive, Oliver corrected, in a way that makes it absolutely clear that you didn't just survive without him. You soared. Besides, Marcus always was obsessed with cars he couldn't afford. The image flashed in her mind, pulling up to the Hampton estate in a car worth more than most people's homes, stepping out in a dress that would haunt Marcus for years, Oliver beside her like a declaration of war. It was petty. It was dramatic. It was perfect. We'd need to time it perfectly, Victoria heard herself saying. Not too early, not too late. After the ceremony, but before the reception really gets going. Leave the logistics to me, Oliver said, already pulling out his phone. You focus on the important part, which is finding a dress that will make him realize exactly what he lost. Victoria looked at the man beside her, this brilliant, successful man who wanted to help her reclaim her narrative, and felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't about Marcus anymore, not really. It was about her, about finally closing a chapter that had haunted her for 2 years. Celeste Moreau, she said suddenly. The designer from Paris. She owes me a favor from when I connected her with the Museum of Modern Art. She could create something unforgettable. Oliver finished. They spent the rest of the evening planning. Chinese takeout growing cold as they strategized like generals preparing for battle. Oliver would handle transportation and timing. Victoria would manage aesthetics and presence. They would arrive together, a united front that would shatter every assumption Marcus and his family had made about her. As Oliver was leaving, he paused at her door. You know this won't change the past, right? Whatever happens, he still left. I know, Victoria said, but maybe it's time I got to write the ending. The next morning, Victoria called Celeste in Paris. The designer listened to the entire story without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disapproval that grew increasingly French and increasingly outraged. This man, Celeste finally said, this Pequeno-minded little man, he dares to steal your anniversary for his tacky wedding? The invitation was definitely a message. Then we send a message back, no? I will create something that will make him weep. When is this farce of a wedding? 3 weeks. Impossible. But for you, ma chérie, I will do the impossible. You will need to fly to Paris for fitting. I can be there this weekend. Bon and Victoria. This dress will not be about him. It will be about you, the woman you've become, the power you hold. He is just an insect who will happen to witness your magnificence. As Victoria hung up, she felt the last of her hesitation dissolve. Marcus Sterling thought he knew who she was. The struggling artist he'd left behind, the dreamer who couldn't match his ambition. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The preparation. The Parisian atelier of Celeste Moreau occupied the top floor of a converted 18th-century mansion in the Marais, its tall windows flooding the space with light that made every fabric seem to glow from within. Victoria stood on the fitting platform, surrounded by mirrors that reflected her from every angle while Celeste circled her like a sculptor studying marble. The color, Celeste murmured, holding up swatches against Victoria's skin. Not black, too obvious. Not red, too desperate. Not white. You're not the bride, thank God. She paused at a piece of fabric that seemed to shift between deep emerald and midnight blue depending on how the light hit it. This blue pawn, peacock blue, it will make your skin glow like porcelain, and your eyes look like obsidian, strong but elegant, powerful but not trying too hard. The dress took shape over the next 48 hours, Celeste and her team of seamstresses working with the intensity of artists possessed. The silhouette was architectural, a structured bodice that emphasized Victoria's curves without being overtly sexual, a neckline that suggested rather than displayed, a skirt that moved like liquid when she walked. The fabric itself was a technical marvel, woven with subtle metallic threads that caught the light with every movement. The shoes, Celeste asked. Louboutin, Victoria replied. Custom piece, midnight blue python with crystal heels. Jewelry, Oliver's handling that. Celeste raised an eyebrow. This Oliver, he understands the assignment? He suggested Graf, specifically the peacock brooch from their private collection. Mon Dieu, a man who understands both strategy and aesthetics. Marry this one, Cherie. Back in New York, Oliver had transformed his home office into what he called the war room. Multiple screens displayed information about the wedding venue, the guest list, acquired through connections Victoria didn't ask about, and detailed timeline projections. The ceremony starts at 4, he explained, pointing to a satellite view of the Hampton estate. Cocktail hour begins at 5:30 on the main lawn. That's our window. Arriving at 6:15 gives us maximum visibility. The sun will be setting, perfect lighting, and everyone will be outside with drinks in hand. You've really thought this through. I've executed hostile takeovers with less planning, Oliver said with a grin. This is actually fun. Also, I had my assistant do reconnaissance. The valet station is here, but I've arranged for us to drive directly to this circular area in front of the main entrance. More visible, more dramatic. Victoria studied the aerial view. She knew that lawn. Had attended garden parties there when she was still Mrs. Marcus Sterling, always feeling like an imposter among the old money crowd. This time would be different. What about security? Private firm, very discreet. I've already had my people reach out. They know a Bugatti Chiron will be arriving with invited guests. They won't stop us. And our exit strategy? We stay exactly 23 minutes. Long enough to be seen by everyone. Have a few strategic conversations, then leave while people are still talking about our arrival. Never overstay the dramatic moment. Victoria's phone rang, her gallery manager, Janet. The Times wants to do a profile, Janet said breathlessly. About the new space, your vision for contemporary art. The whole trajectory. They're calling you the definitive success story of the New York art world. When? Next month. But Victoria, they specifically mentioned your transformation from unknown to industry leader in just 2 years. This is huge. After she hung up, Oliver was smiling. The timing's perfect. By the time that article runs, everyone at that wedding will have already seen exactly how well you're doing. The week before the wedding, Victoria threw herself into her work, finalizing pieces for the gallery's new location. The space itself was a marvel, a former bank in Tribeca that she'd transformed into a temple of contemporary art. The opening was scheduled for April, and already every major collector in the city had RSVP'd. 3 days before the wedding, the dress arrived from Paris via courier, packed in tissue paper that itself probably cost more than most wedding dresses. Victoria tried it on in her bedroom, and even in the mundane setting, the effect was transformative. She looked like what she was, a woman who had rebuilt herself into something stronger and more beautiful than before. Oliver arrived that evening with a velvet box from Graf. Inside, the peacock brooch sparkled with such intensity that Victoria actually gasped. Sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds arranged in the shape of a peacock with its tail spread, so perfectly matched to her dress it seemed like destiny. It's on loan, Oliver said. Though if you want to keep it, Oliver, this must be worth about the same as the car. Consider it part of the presentation. The night before the wedding, Victoria couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, looking out at the city lights, and wondered if she was making a mistake. Was this closure or just reopening old wounds? Her phone lit up with a text from Oliver. Having second thoughts? Instead of texting back, she called him. How did you know? Because you're human, he said gently. And because revenge, even justified revenge, always feels complicated the night before. Is this revenge, though? Or is it just showing up? It's you refusing to be erased from your own story. Marcus tried to rewrite history with this wedding date. You're adding a footnote that says, the author of this narrative is unreliable. Very literary of you. I have hidden depths. Get some sleep, Victoria. Tomorrow, you remind them all that the best revenge is a life well lived. The morning of March 15th dawned crisp and clear. One of those perfect early spring days that made everything seem possible. Victoria went through her usual morning routine. Yoga, coffee, reviewing gallery emails, maintaining normalcy until it was time to transform. The hair and makeup team Oliver had hired arrived at noon. The same people who worked with celebrities before the Met Gala. They understood the assignment without being told. Elegance with an edge. Classic with a modern twist, beautiful but not trying to upstage the bride even though she would anyway. By 4 o'clock, as Marcus was presumably saying his vows, Victoria stood in front of her full-length mirror, complete. The dress moved like water and light. The brooch caught fire with every breath. Her hair swept up to show the delicate diamond earrings Oliver had also procured. She looked like what she was, success incarnate. Oliver arrived at 5, and when she opened the door, he actually took a step back. Jesus, Victoria. Too much. Perfect. He's going to have a heart attack. Oliver himself looked magnificent in a bespoke Tom Ford suit that emphasized his tall, lean frame. Together they looked like what they were, a power couple who had no business being at a mid-tier society wedding except to demonstrate what real success looked like. The Bugatti. Kyron sat outside her brownstone like a spaceship that had landed in Brooklyn. Hypercar blue with carbon fiber accents. It seemed to vibrate with barely contained power even while stationary. Neighbors had already started gathering, phones out, documenting the rare sight. "Ready?" Oliver asked, holding open the scissor door. Victoria slid into the passenger seat, the leather embracing her like a promise. "Let's go show them what they missed." The drive to the Hamptons should have taken 2 hours. In the Bugatti, with Oliver driving with controlled precision, they made it in 70 minutes. As they turned onto the private road leading to the Sterling estate, Victoria felt her heart rate spike. This was it, the moment of truth. "Remember," Oliver said, "we're not here to cause a scene. We're here to be seen. There's a difference." The estate gates were open, wedding guests still arriving in their Bentleys and Mercedes, cars that would have impressed Victoria once upon a time. The Bugatti made them look like toys. As they approached the valet station, Oliver smoothly bypassed it, heading for the circular drive as planned. The valet actually ran after them, then stopped, recognizing the futility. Everyone stopped. The Bugatti Chiron came to rest in front of the main entrance like a declaration of war, its engine purring before Oliver killed it. Through the windshield, Victoria could see the cocktail hour in full swing on the lawn. Hundreds of guests in their pastel finery, champagne flutes catching the late afternoon sun. 23 minutes, Oliver reminded her. "Starting now." He came around to open her door, offering his hand. Victoria emerged from the car in one fluid motion, the dress catching the light exactly as Celeste had intended. The peacock brooch threw tiny rainbows across the limestone facade. The silence started at the valet stand and rippled outward like a wave across the lawn. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips. Every eye turned to watch Victoria Chen. No, Victoria Monroe now. She'd taken back her maiden name, walk up those stairs she'd once climbed as an uncertain bride. From somewhere in the crowd, she heard a glass shatter. The games had begun. The arrival. The shattered champagne flute belonged to Marcus's mother, Eleanor Sterling. Victoria caught sight of her frozen near the garden fountain, her face a masterpiece of shock that even Botox couldn't hide. The older woman's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish, searching for words that wouldn't come. Victoria didn't acknowledge her. Instead, she moved through the crowd with Oliver at her side, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She had learned long ago that true power didn't announce itself. It simply arrived and let others adjust to its presence. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea, a corridor of stunned faces and whispered speculation. Victoria recognized many of them. Marcus's Yale friends who had always treated her like an amusing pet, his father's business associates who had looked through her at dinner parties, the Southampton set who had made it clear she would never truly belong. Now they stared at her like she was a completely different species. Victoria Chen? The voice belonged to Bradley Morrison, Marcus's best man, presumably. He looked older, softer around the middle, his Harvard confidence diminished by genuine confusion. "Victoria Monroe," she corrected pleasantly. "Bradley, how nice to see you." Bradley's eyes darted between her and Oliver, then to the Bugatti still commanding the circular drive like a bright blue accusation. We didn't think you'd," Marcus said. "You weren't coming." Victoria smiled. "But I was invited. Such a lovely invitation, too. The date especially. So thoughtful." The sarcasm was subtle enough that Bradley couldn't quite respond to it, but sharp enough that he felt it. He mumbled something about getting a drink and retreated. 10 o'clock, Oliver murmured in her ear. "Incoming!" Marcus appeared at the top of the lawn, still in his wedding attire, a classic morning coat that probably cost a fortune but somehow made him look like he was playing dress-up. He had seen her. His face was a study in emotions cycling too quickly to hide. Shock, anger, something that might have been regret, and finally an attempt at casual indifference that failed spectacularly. Beside him, pulling on his arm, was Penelope. The new Mrs. Sterling was exactly what her photos had suggested. Pretty in a conventional way, blonde hair styled in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours, wearing a wedding dress that screamed money but whispered insecurity. The dress was overwrought, too many crystals, too much tulle, as if she was trying to convince everyone, including herself, that this was a fairy tale. They descended the lawn toward Victoria and Oliver. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. "Victoria," Marcus said when he was close enough. His voice cracked slightly on her name. "I didn't think that I'd come." Victoria let her smile sharpen just a fraction. "But you sent such a beautiful invitation. How could I resist? Congratulations, by the way. March 15th, such a meaningful date." Marcus's jaw clenched. Beside him, Penelope's grip on his arm tightened, her knuckles white against his sleeve. "You must be Penelope," Victoria continued, extending her hand with perfect grace. "How lovely to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you." She hadn't, of course. Marcus had been erased from her life so thoroughly that she knew nothing about his relationship beyond what she'd Googled. But the implication, that people talked, that comparisons were made, hung in the air like perfume. Penelope took her hand reluctantly, her grip weak and slightly damp. "Thank you for coming," she managed, though her eyes said the opposite. "We wouldn't have missed it," Oliver said, speaking for the first time. His presence seemed to suddenly register with Marcus, who looked at him the way one might look at a challenger entering the ring. "Oliver Thorne," Oliver introduced himself, though something in Marcus's expression suggested the name was familiar. "Beautiful venue, though I imagine you're used to it by now. Family estate and all." The reminder that Marcus had inherited everything while Oliver had built his empire from nothing landed perfectly. Marcus's face reddened. "That's quite a car," Marcus said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "Rental?" Oliver laughed, genuinely amused. "The Chiron? No, I took delivery last week. Number 7 of 30. The appreciation on these is remarkable. Almost as good as my fund's returns." Victoria watched Marcus process this. The casual mention of a $3.5 million car as an investment. The reference to Oliver's fund, which, if Marcus had done his research, he'd know was worth north of $2 billion. "We should let you get back to your guests," Victoria said smoothly. "We just wanted to stop by and wish you well." "Stop by?" Penelope's voice pitched higher. "You're not staying for dinner?" "Oh no," Victoria said, as if the idea was absurd. "We have plans in the city. The Bernardin at 8. Oliver knows the chef. We just wanted to make an appearance, given the significance of the date." She let that hang, watched Marcus flinch at the reminder of what March 15th had once meant. "Besides," Oliver added, checking his Patek Philippe, a watch worth more than most people's houses, "we're flying to Venice tomorrow. The Biennale preview for collectors. Victoria's been invited to acquire pieces for the new gallery space." "New gallery space?" Marcus couldn't help asking. "Tribeca," Victoria said casually. "The old Merchants Bank building. Maybe you've seen the coverage in the Times. They're doing a feature next month." She watched him absorb this, his ex-wife. The struggling artist he'd left behind, now owned prime New York real estate and was being featured in the Times. His expression was priceless. "How wonderful," Penelope said faintly. She looked like she might faint, actually. Her fairy tale wedding becoming something else entirely, the moment her new husband's past arrived to show him what he'd lost. From across the lawn, Eleanor Sterling was approaching with the determination of a battleship, clearly intent on removing Victoria from the premises. But before she could arrive, something even better happened. "Victoria? Victoria Monroe?" The voice belonged to James Whitmore, one of the most influential art collectors in New York, a man whose approval could make or break careers. He was also, Victoria remembered with satisfaction, Eleanor Sterling's cousin. "James." Victoria turned to him with genuine warmth. "I didn't know you'd be here. Family obligation," he said with a wry smile that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "But my God, Victoria, I've been following your work. That Nakamura exhibition was genius. And I heard about the Tribeca space, extraordinary vision. You two know each other?" Eleanor had finally arrived, slightly out of breath, her careful composure cracking. Know each other? James laughed. Eleanor, Victoria is the most exciting curator in New York right now. I've been trying to get her to sell me pieces from her private collection for months. She has an eye like no one else in the city. Victoria felt rather than saw Marcus's reaction. This was his mother's cousin, a man whose approval Marcus had desperately sought for years, praising his ex-wife at his wedding. We were just leaving, Victoria said graciously. But James, call my office Monday. I might have something you'd be interested in. A early Kusama that just came available. You're an angel, James said, kissing her cheek. And this must be the Oliver Thorne I've been reading about. That Singapore acquisition was brilliant. As Oliver and James shook hands, Victoria caught Marcus's expression. He looked like a man watching his own funeral, seeing the life he could have had if he hadn't been so stupid, so arrogant, so blind. We should go, Victoria said to Oliver, who nodded. They said their goodbyes, Victoria kissing the air near Penelope's cheek, shaking Marcus's hand with just enough distance to be polite but not warm. As they walked back toward the Bugatti, Victoria was aware of every eye following them, of the whispers rising like a tide behind them. The valet, obviously alerted to their departure, had cleared a path. Oliver opened her door with the same ceremony as before, helping her into the car with a grace that made their exit feel like choreography. As Oliver started the engine, that distinctive Bugatti roar that sounded like barely controlled thunder, Victoria looked back one last time. Marcus stood where they'd left him, Penelope still clinging to his arm but now looking at him with something like suspicion. Eleanor was beside them, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. But it was Marcus's expression that Victoria would remember. He wasn't looking at his new bride or his mother or his guests. He was looking at her, at what he'd thrown away, at the woman who had become everything he'd said she couldn't be. Oliver pulled away slowly, letting the engine sing, letting everyone hear exactly what leaving sounded like when you did it on your own terms. As they passed through the gates, Victoria felt something in her chest release, a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 2 years. You okay? Oliver asked, reaching over to take her hand. You know what? I actually am. No regrets? Victoria thought about it. None. It wasn't about him in the end. It was about me. About proving to myself that his opinion of me was never my truth. And now? Now we go to dinner. Then Venice. Then the rest of our lives. She squeezed his hand. Lives that have absolutely nothing to do with Marcus Sterling. As the Bugatti hit the highway, accelerating with the smooth power of something built to fly, Victoria realized the truth of it. Marcus would go back to his reception, to his new wife who would forever wonder about the woman in peacock blue who'd turned her wedding into a footnote. He would think about this day, about her, about what he'd lost, probably forever. And Victoria? Victoria would think about him less and less, until he became what he'd already started to become. A lesson learned, a bridge crossed. A chapter closed. The sun was setting as they drove back toward the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and possibility. Oliver had connected his phone to the car's sound system, and music filled the space, something jazzy and sophisticated that felt like freedom. Thank you, Victoria said suddenly, for understanding what I needed. For helping me reclaim this day? Always, Oliver replied simply. Though next time someone underestimates you, maybe we skip the dramatic entrance and just buy their company? Victoria laughed, real and bright. Where's the fun in that? Part 4. The aftermath. The photos started appearing on social media within hours. Someone had captured the exact moment Victoria stepped out of the Bugatti, her dress catching the light like liquid starlight. Another showed her and Oliver walking through the crowd, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread on power couples. The most shared image, though, was a wide shot that captured everything. The hypercar, the stunned wedding guests, and in the background, slightly out of focus but clearly visible, Marcus and Penelope looking like they'd seen a ghost. By the time Victoria and Oliver were finishing dinner at Le Bernardin, Wedding Crash was trending in New York social media circles. You've gone viral, Oliver said, showing her his phone over dessert. Victoria glanced at the screen, then went back to her soufflé. Good for them. They needed something to talk about. From what I remember, Eleanor's parties were usually deadly dull. But the real aftermath came in smaller, more personal waves. The first text arrived that night, From a number Victoria had deleted but still recognized. Marcus. We need to talk. Victoria showed it to Oliver, who was reading in bed beside her. What do you want to do? Nothing, Victoria said, deleting the message. I've said everything I needed to say. But Marcus wasn't done. The texts kept coming over the next days. What you did was cruel. You humiliated Penelope. Was he worth it? Throwing away your dignity for revenge? I know you're reading these. Victoria deleted them all without responding. Marcus had always needed the last word, needed to control the narrative. Her silence was more powerful than any response could be. A week later, while Victoria was in Venice with Oliver, selecting pieces for her gallery, her phone rang with a call from Bradley Morrison. Victoria, hey, he said, sounding uncomfortable. Look, I'm calling because, well, Marcus is not doing great. That sounds like a personal problem, Victoria replied, examining a sculpture that might work for her main gallery space. He and Penelope had a huge fight on their honeymoon. She kept asking about you, about your relationship. She feels like he used their wedding to get back at you, and now she's questioning everything. Again, Bradley, I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because he's drinking again. You know how he gets. Victoria did know. Marcus was a mean drunk, something she'd endured more times than she cared to remember. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Bradley Marcus made his choices. He chose to leave. He chose to get married on our anniversary. He chose to send me an invitation. What happens next is also his choice. I'm not his keeper anymore. You really have moved on, Bradley said, sounding surprised. Yes, Victoria said simply. I have. The real vindication came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the wedding, Victoria was in her office at the gallery when Janet knocked on her door. There's an Eleanor Sterling here to see you. Says it's important. Victoria considered refusing, then curiosity won. Send her in. Eleanor entered like she was walking into enemy territory. Her Chanel suit impeccable, but her usual imperious expression replaced with something Victoria had never seen before. Uncertainty. Victoria, Eleanor began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss. Eleanor, would you like to sit? The older woman perched on the edge of the designer chair like it might bite her. I came to apologize. Victoria said nothing, waiting. I was wrong about you, Eleanor continued, the words clearly costing her. I thought you weren't good enough for Marcus, that you were holding him back. But seeing you at the wedding, seeing what you've become... She paused, gathering herself. Marcus is the one who wasn't good enough for you. Why are you really here, Eleanor? The older woman's composure cracked slightly. Penelope left him. Filed for annulment. Apparently she realized that any man who would use his wedding to hurt his ex-wife might not be marriage material. Victoria felt no satisfaction at this news, just a distant kind of pity. I'm sorry to hear that, are you? Eleanor's voice sharpened. You destroyed his life. No, Victoria said firmly. Marcus destroyed his own life. I just refused to let him destroy mine. Eleanor stood to leave, then paused at the door. That young man you're with, Oliver Thorne. Don't make Marcus's mistake. Don't let him go. After she left, Victoria sat in her office looking out at the city she'd conquered without Marcus, and realized she felt nothing. No triumph, no sadness, no anger. Marcus Sterling had become what he'd always feared being, irrelevant to her life.